We are extremely fortunate to have as our keynote speaker one of the leading voices in German politics and on issues of European and international relations. Mr. Niels Annen is member of the German Parliament, the Bundestag. He is a spokesman for the foreign affairs for the Social Democratic Parliamentary Group, and he is a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Bundestag. I could say that this makes him the counterpart of the ranking member of the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee, but with an important difference, and that is that the foreign minister's portfolio in Germany's coalition is held by his party. So therefore, he and his party have a very big share in setting policy within Germany. Mr. Annen is a second term in the Bundestag. He represents a district from the great port of Hamburg. He serves on his party's National Executive Committee, and together with Martin Schulz, President of the European Parliament, he co-chairs the SPD's Commission on International Politics. He's a strong advocate of diplomacy, the protection of human rights, and using multilateral engagement to address conflict and crisis situations. He's no stranger to Washington, D.C. In fact, he got his master's degree from Johns Hopkins SAIS. Mr. Annen will speak this morning about the European Union's partnership with Turkey and the path ahead, and then he'll have an opportunity to respond to some of your questions. This portion is only half an hour, so there won't be that many questions, but I really look forward to his remarks, and please welcome His Honorable Niels Annen.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Madam President Wendy, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I have to say, I'm delighted to have that opportunity to speak to so many people here in Washington. And after having listened to the excellent panel, I may have to say for my own, for the expectation management, as we say, I'm not a Turkey scholar. I'm just a politician, so don't expect too much from me. Well, one cannot talk about our relationship, the German-Turkish relationship, without taking a look at recent German-Turkish history. I say that not because I'm a historian by training, and of course I like to look back in history, but I think it's paramount to understand why that relationship is not an ordinary relationship for us. For Germany, Turkey is not simply a partner on Europe's southern fringe. It is, as I said, much more than that. At least in that part of the country where I was born in West Germany, there's no school class without Turkish children. There's no medium-sized company without Turkish people working there. And there's, of course, no football or, as you say, soccer club where Turkish people are active and contributing. And just to name one figure, alone last year, tourism was mentioned. 5.5 million Germans visited Turkey. So if there are political tensions, these are reflected in many German cities. And as Wendy mentioned, my district is in Hamburg, a big port city. And as in every major German city, there are various communities living in Hamburg which have their roots in Turkey. But where many issues are concerned, they share anything but the same opinion. Conflicts between President Erdogan and his opponents are also fought out in my constituency. 99%, I would say, of that conflicts are resolved peacefully, discussions, demonstrations, but there also have been violence, and also violence by PKK cadres over the last years. People were killed. Terrorist attacks have been also organized on German soil. I think the intense relationship between Germany and Turkey on all kinds of our relationship is something that you probably would expect between neighboring states. And the reasons why Germany and Turkey are so closely connected have a lot to do with post-war history. You may know that hundreds of thousands of Turkish men and women migrated to West Germany principally to find work there. While for many years Germany, and I would say German politics, failed to acknowledge that we are indeed a country of migration and immigration, the majority of the population has now come to acknowledge that this is so. But it's also true it has been taking a long time. The integration of Turkish Germans into the society is not a real success story in all aspects. We have to be also very self-critical. And unfortunately, there are sections of our population and also on the political right who refuse to accept society as it is, who in response to globalization foster a nationalism which for good reasons I thought we have left behind us. You will be probably aware about the discussion in Europe on the new right-wing populism in Europe, which has been further intensified this year in the wake of the refugee crisis. In 2016, there are now around 3 million people of Turkish origin living not in Hamburg, but in Germany. We are 1.8 million inhabitants, so I would have noticed that. So that is with a population, of course, with 82 million, a minority, but it is a significant minority, especially in the big cities. And they also have an influence in terms of electoral politics. By the way, this is also true because many of them can vote in Turkish elections too. So we need to acknowledge this and take this into consideration. So why I'm telling this to this audience? In light of these ties, close ties with Turkey, there's much more awareness in Germany of what goes on in Turkey than about what is happening in some of our closer EU neighbor countries. These days it will be hard to find anybody in Germany who has not an opinion about President Erdogan. One example from the very recent past, which sheds a light on the complex relation between Germany and Turkey, was indeed the discussion on the Armenia resolution in the German Bundestag. As you may know, in June this year, the German parliament adopted a resolution supported on a cross-party basis commemorating the genocide in Armenia 1950-1960, and clearly and unequivocally using the word genocide. One motivation I want to emphasize is, behind that resolution was that the German Empire, as the main military ally of the Ottoman Empire, played a shameful role by not making efforts, despite clear information, to stop this crime. There was a great deal of debate. When the resolution finally was adopted, President Erdogan personally took issue with it and condemned it. In Germany, threats were made against members of the Bundestag of Turkish origin who had been to be given police protection. For months, Turkey has refused to allow German members of parliament to visit Bundeswehr troops stationed at Incirlik Air Base, where German Tornado aircraft are deployed in the fight against Daesh. This, ladies and gentlemen, shows how charged relations are at this point of time. It is also true, however, that the discussion on Turkey in Germany sometimes takes bizarre forms. Alongside justified criticism on the policies of President Erdogan, there is an unpleasant anti-Turkish and anti-Islamic flavor to the criticism voiced, especially on the political right. If politicians who otherwise care little about minority rights get heated up about President Erdogan and use the protection of minorities as a reason to argue that Turkey has lost nothing in Europe and call on the German government to cease cooperation with Turkey, this, ladies and gentlemen, also reveals resentment with respect to Turkey, which unfortunately extends into the middle class camp. Ladies and gentlemen, one only has to glance at the map to understand the crucial geostrategic importance of Turkey. Unfortunately, a whole raft of populists in Europe blatantly ignore these facts and act as though, they act as if they thought a fence could be built around the fortress Europe, or in Washington I may say, a wall. The question for the EU, however, is not whether it should cooperate with Turkey, but simply what form and quality that cooperation should take. For a long time, the answer to the question as to what relationship between the EU and Turkey should be lay with the European Union. And one person who was always seeing the situation outstanding and the outstanding importance of Turkey for Europe was former Chancellor Gerhard Schröder. In his time in office between 1998 and 2005, he successfully lobbied for Turkey to be offered real prospects of joining the European Union. But it's also true that this position was met with great skepticism on parts of our EU partners, but also on parts of our current coalition partner, the Christian Democratic Union, including the head of the CDU, Angela Merkel, who was later to become chancellor. As a result, the conservative camp very quickly started to talk about privileged partnership, which was to offer to Turkey instead of full membership. And once Merkel's government came to power, this became the de facto position of the German government. I believe it has caused a great deal of damage. The skepticism vis-à-vis Turkey, which surfaced in Germany, France, and other countries of the European Union, I believe, was clearly registered in Turkey and led to a feeling of rejection. The impression in Turkey was, we can do everything in terms of reforms, but in the end, we will not be able to join the club. And of course, part of the truth also is that this narrative has been seized and nourished by certain forces in Turkey, further reinforcing Turkey's detachment from the EU. President Erdogan, too, has always known how to use the disappointment felt in Turkey with respect to Europeans for his own ends. I believe we have paid too little regard to this feeling. Officially, accession negotiations proceeded. Europe welcomed the reforming zeal displayed by Erdogan after he came to power. But off the record, everybody admitted that, in fact, it was unlikely that Turkey would become a member. It was, and it is still right, to criticize the overreaction of the Turkish government to the attempted coup. But I believe it would have been more correct in the immediate aftermath of the attempted coup to have done more to show solidarity with Turkish democracy, which is not the same as the Turkish government. And unfortunately, no senior German politician flew to Ankara, for example, in a symbolic show of solidarity. We in the West collectively acted too hesitantly and followed only our yes, but reflex, instead of considering how our behavior would actually be perceived in Turkey. Despite all this, however, the answer to the question regarding the intensity of our partnership rests today with Turkey itself. If the foundation of Turkey's political orientation change, the form of our cooperation will also necessarily change. To put it more plainly, the more Turkey internally moves away from democratic principles and the rule of law, the greater will be the political distance from the EU, and there will also be a change in the way we deal with each other. Turkey, ladies and gentlemen, is an important partner in the fight against terrorism. And I know it has been directly been affected by terrorist attacks. It will therefore be, in all likelihood, remain an ally, even if it departed from the democratic path. A relationship with Turkey that kept its back turned on the European Union would be marked by, I would say, maybe a healthy pragmatism, but also by less trust. Cooperation would be driven above all by the logic that cooperation was necessary because common interests demanded this, but probably not because we have shared values or pursue common political aims. Ladies and gentlemen, our preference is for another way. We not only want to reduce tensions with Turkey, we also want to accompany a democratic Turkey along the path to membership of the European Union. And I am firmly convinced that this is also in the interest of the United States and that we should work together to achieve this aim. We are prepared to learn from our own mistakes, but one thing is clear. The path to Europe leads only via fulfillment of the political conditions imposed not on Turkey, but on every candidate for the European Union. It is not for moral or ideological reasons that we must make it our aim to continue to pave Turkey's way to Europe. It is in our own core interest. For Germany, there is no question, I talked about this, that our large German-Turkish community plays an important role. It is important for their integration into the German society. But this also includes peaceful settlement of the Turkish-Kurdish conflict. Naturally, it has been mentioned, Turkey has the right and has the duty to protect its citizens from terrorist threats. But this conflict cannot be resolved militarily. I hope that the process of negotiations between the government and the PKK can be restarted. By the way, experiences from other migrant societies show, moreover, that establishment of a stable hybrid identity is important for true integration. And for this, we need a more positive image of Turkey also in Germany's mainstream media. Ladies and gentlemen, this year in particular, we have observed a series of developments in Turkey about which I have great concerns. Even before the attempted coup, these concerns related to the restriction of media freedom, the stripping of immunity of numerous members of the Turkish parliament, the lack of proportionality in the fight against PKK, and also the ambivalent role Turkey played in the Syrian conflict. Here I hope, and I continue to hope, for a change of course. Since the coup, however, our concerns have only grown. These concerns relate not only to whether the wave of arrests and dismissals in the aftermath of the 15th of July were in line with constitutional principles, or the fact that Turkey is seriously considering reintroducing the death penalty. We are also concerned that the overreaction to the attempted coup, which I think is important to state clearly, seems sometimes like a witch hunt against actual or supposed followers of Mr. Gülen, and also has its sight on other critics of the regime, is destabilizing the internal institutional structures of Turkey. Turkey's relationship with the US too has been placed under great strain by the demand of the extradition of Mr. Gülen and also by disagreements on the right deal with the Syrian YPG. It is in the interest of neither Germany nor Europe as a whole to have a bad relationship between NATO's most important member, Turkey, USA, and Turkey. So this is most important, of course. And I don't know if you followed President Erdogan's harsh words at the General Assembly. I think it's really a cause of concern. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude. Whatever the justified criticism of the actions and the rhetoric of President Erdogan, the past weeks and even the past hours and days have shown that he is not the erratic, incalculable president the German press likes to depict him. The rapprochement with Russia and Israel are signs of pragmatism, which I welcome. I would counter all the prophecies of doom which claim that Erdogan is turning towards Russia at the expense of the West by saying that President Erdogan knows very well what he has in NATO and that Russia cannot play anywhere near the same economic role for Turkey that the European Union does. I have the slight hope that this pragmatism will also soon be shown in Turkey's relationship with the US and Europe. One indication for this is that despite all the rhetoric, Turkey is abiding by the refugee agreement with the European Union, and negotiations between Turkey and Europe on visa liberalization are going forward. And while no swift agreement on this issue is to be expected, I believe it may be possible to reach a solution in the coming months. Ladies and gentlemen, while the ball is in Turkey's court, and it is for Turkey to decide what path it takes, we must play our part by remaining in play and creating incentives for Turkey to set course for the West again. This is where, as I have said, we have made mistakes in the past, which we should not repeat. We must do all we can to ensure that we do not meet again in this setting and have to ask ourselves who lost Turkey. It is in the genuine interest of Europe, the United States, and Turkey to arrive at a close, value-based relationship. Of course, establishing this state of affairs is not a question for months or weeks, but a few years. But since the start of the negotiations on EU accession, Turkey has moved quite a long way to meet our expectations, and at the same time has benefited the economic and social development of the country. Ladies and gentlemen, let us try to return to that successful path. I thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think I was particularly impressed by your candor and your clarity. Let me ask one question, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Many people, or some people, have observed that with regards to Syria, there are a number of different approaches. That the United States sees Syria largely as a terrorist issue. The Turks see Syria as a Kurdish issue. Germany sees, and Europe sees Syria as an immigration issue, and Syrians see it as an existential survival issue. With these vastly different views of the Syrian crisis, how are we going to come together to solve a crisis which is, in essence, the root cause of the immigration crisis that you were talking about?
Well, if I would have the answer to that question, I probably would address an even bigger audience today. But let me say that Syria is right now on the top of our domestic agenda. That was, I think, never been the case in Germany before. It has to do with the fact that we welcomed roughly 1 million refugees, many of them from Syria and Iraq. And that not only because of the humanitarian disaster that is happening before the eyes of the world, we have a very narrow interest in managing that migration flow and the situation of refugees. Germany this year is the biggest donor on humanitarian aid for Syria. And our foreign minister and chancellor are almost on a daily basis engaged in diplomatic efforts Steinmeier is working very closely with Secretary Kerry to achieve negotiations. And we know that there is only a political solution at the end of the day, and that it must include Turkey. So I only briefly mentioned Syria. We had the impression that the Turkish government's position was very ambivalent. The border to ISIS-controlled territory has been reduced to, I think, a very small part today. But we observed also, our services observed, that there was relatively free movement between the border, and that there are informal support structures for ISIS on Turkish territories that were not, stopped in their activities as I believe they could have been stopped. But we also, from the very beginning, understood that the question of Turkish autonomy is, and would be probably for every Turkish government, of pivotal importance. So we always tried to talk about this. But I mean, at the end of the day, there's only one fighting force in Syria that effectively is fighting against ISIS troops. So the German position is also in a way ambivalent, because the mother organization of the YPG, PKK, is a banned terrorist organization in Germany. But we believe that in that circumstance, fighting ISIS should be in our common interest. So, and that's why we decided not to support YPG troops, but we decided to cooperate with the Iraqi Kurds. But it's certainly necessary for both sides to engage in political discussions. And what the colleague of the HDP said, that they are seeking not independence but autonomy, could maybe be a starting point for negotiations. But we are very concerned that there would be an additional conflict added to the already great mess that we are seeing in Syria. And so we are trying to use our diplomatic channels to talk to our Turkish friends, but also to use low-level contacts that we have with the political representatives of the PYD.
Excellent, thank you. We'll take 3 questions from the audience, one from the back, one from the middle, and one from the front. So please raise your hands. Okay, the fellow in the blue shirt from the front.
Tobias Hillenbrand from American University. I've got, thank you very much for your remarks. I've got a quick question for you regarding the EU perspective, basically. You said, or considering the tensions between the European Union and the Turkish administration, do you currently have the impression that Erdogan is still willing actually to join the EU, or is he rather considering other ways, basically?
Okay, from the middle, are there a fellow with the beard? Standing.
Thank you very much. Hi, this is Kasım İleri with the Anadolu Agency, the Turkish news agency. I listened to your remarks, sir, that you expressed your concerns about the overreaction by the Turkish government to the coup attempt. However, unfortunately, I couldn't hear anything from you to denounce this bloody coup attempt which killed 240 people. More than 2,000 people were wounded. Turkish parliament was attacked. Turkish military buildings, Turkish presidential palace was attacked. And you didn't mention any kind of denouncement of this coup attempt. My question is, I wonder what is the European politicians or European countries are expecting from the Turkish government to do against those traitors who attacked the nation, who attacked the buildings which are representing the will of the nation, and to the government, democratically elected government. What are your expectations from the government to do? What are the things that you call are overreaction? what should be the proportionate reaction according to you? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And then from this side of the room? Right here. Wait for the microphone, please. Microphone?
Thank you very much. I heard from you about, let's say, pragmatism of Erdogan. I had 26 talks in Turkey during the last 25 years. And when I see the public in Turkey, I see the kind of sensationalism is coming ahead. We have seen Erdogan is changing, dividing with his domestic partners, Gulen, with, let's say, internationally, with the West, and come to Israel, Monday, stand up and quit, and the next time comes with Russia, they hit the plane and then come back. So is it instrumentalism or is it pragmatism? For me, instrumentalism is to go after the mass, and pragmatism is to lead the mass. If it is instrumentalism, is it trustworthy partner? Is he a trustworthy partner as an Iranian American? I think that both for Iran and for America, or no, he's not. And what should we do about it? Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I mean, I cannot answer the question about President Erdogan's policies. I can only look at the past. And I also mentioned this in my speech, that reforms were introduced. I mean, today, unfortunately, there's a discussion of reintroducing the death penalty. But we should remember that it was abolished under his leadership, and that many reforms were introduced, and in a way also surprised, I think, the European public, because we did not saw, with all respect also to my political friends in Turkey, these kinds of institutional reforms under other governments. So I do not doubt that there was a genuine intention and an authentic agenda to put Turkey on the path to European Union membership. I mentioned our former Chancellor Gerhard Schröder, and I really believe that he understood the geostrategic importance of Turkey for Europe, but especially also for Germany. That's why I gave so much time to express or explain the special relationship, in a way, Germany and Turkey are having. But we always knew, I remember discussions in the leadership of my party, because it was far from being a consensual position that Schröder took. He decided, and he was somebody who exercised leadership. And also within the group of European parliamentarians, not only in Germany, but all over Europe, who believes that a majority Muslim country should not become member of the European Union. I believe that if Turkey can meet the conditions to become a member, it should become a member. It would strengthen our community. It would strengthen the attractiveness, and even maybe adding to stabilizing that troubled and difficult regions that we are talking about. So I really don't know. I believe it's true that the support for President Erdogan also stems from the extraordinary economic success story that Turkey has seen over the last years. There's also political loyalty being built, and it apparently leads to discussions within Turkish leadership whether or not Turkey needs to look to become a member, or maybe there are also people who believe that Turkey in itself is strong enough to remain or even to become a more important country in the region without looking for the European Union membership perspective. I really believe that that would not be good for Turkey, but it would also not be good for Europe, also from a security point of view. So the argument that we are having also in our governing coalition is whether or not, because of that de facto closed-door policy, we lost momentum and supported those forces who are not pro-European within Turkey. So my position is very clear. If there's a reintroduction of the death penalty, that's a deal breaker, because it's one, I know I'm talking to a US audience here, but this is one of our core beliefs, and we are not going to compromise on that. And that is also true for some of the other criteria. But no, some of my conservative friends say, well, look, we always told you so. Look what Erdogan is doing. So we should close that chapter once and for all. And I say no. We should be clear and consequential. So if Turkey is leaving the path towards EU, then probably it even makes no sense to further negotiate. But our message needs to be also that if this is going to change, they will be not standing before closed doors. That would be the wrong message. So we need to talk to President Erdogan and his government. And I think I gave you some indication about whether I'm happy or not about what is happening right now. But we need to deal with the Turkish government. It's not our decision to compose the Turkish government. And so I think that is also a little bit the answer to your question. Because I can hand you over my remarks to the second question, sir. I mean, I criticized my own government that they were not sending high-level representatives to Ankara immediately after the coup as a sign of solidarity. If I remember it right, Vice President Biden also mentioned something that it would have been better to be there, I don't know, a day or two after the coup. And I also mentioned that we should show solidarity with Turkish democracy. So if that was not understood as a denouncement of the attempted coup, I can repeat that I denounce that attempted coup, and I believe that military government has never served Turkey well, and that is also true for other parts of the world. So there should be no doubt about our and also my personal basic position on this.
Thank you very much, and please join me in thanking His Excellency.